Isabella, thank you so much for joining our show today. I really appreciate you joining us and sharing your story and being vulnerable with us. That is not an easy thing to do, and I just wanted to say, truly, truly, I appreciate you and thank you.
Thank you, Ari. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to share my story, and I appreciate that you're opening your platform for that to happen. So thank you.
With your permission, I would like to ask you a little bit of a difficult question and ask you to return to the most difficult point in your life.
There's really two that were equally as difficult. I didn't expect that question, so I'm probably going to cry. But the most difficult time in my life was when I was 3 months pregnant with my second child, and my husband had gone off to work. He was he was a genius, and he was a brilliant man, a spiritual warrior and a real warrior. And he was just started up a new company where he was training executives from Telecom. It's an Australian telecommunications company. And he went to work, and I got a call at 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh, sorry, not a call. I got a knock on the door at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was the local policeman and a neighbor, and they came to tell me that he'd been found dead in his car. And it was worked on by the paramedics, but he was completely gone. So I was my dreams of living on a farm and being self-sufficient, that's what we were working towards. And of course, dreams of a family and all that just went in that moment. And I had to sell the farm and find a reason for living, which took a long time. And then I had to find a new home and create my life anew. That was the worst moment in my life up until that point.
First of all, let me just send you a virtual hug here. That's an incredibly difficult thing to go through.
Well,
Go
I've
ahead.
also lost a child too, so speaking from experience, they were both I just didn't want to I
Horrific.
didn't want to live after either of those situations. I didn't want to take another breath. And yeah.
I can hardly imagine how you could pull yourself out from that.
Well, the only reason I didn't take myself out was because in the first situation when my husband passed, I had a child and I was 3 months pregnant. So I didn't feel like I had the right to just exit. And then when my son was murdered, I had two other children, and I didn't feel like I could inflict any more pain on them by taking myself out. So that was the only reason I stayed, was because I had children. Otherwise, I would have killed myself, and being very happy to do so. And so what it really looked like was just hell. I remember when my son passed, I didn't even like leave the bedroom for months. I went from breath to breath. And then when my husband passed, I just traveled around. I stayed with friends. Nowhere felt like home. I didn't really know what to do or how to like refocus my life again. It took years. Both of those situations have taken years of work. I have been to see therapists, and got advice from other people on how to cope. But really, it was just me pulling on something inside myself that connected me back to life again. But it took a long time, and it's still a work in progress. There's I don't think that the whole idea of closure is just absolute bullshit. Like, nothing really closes. It's just, I saw a cartoon, and it was like the grief stays, but I kind of get bigger in my understanding of life, and my consciousness expands. So the grief's still there, and all the the rage and the anger, it's not so strong now, but it's, as you can see, just talking about it, it brings it all straight back up again.
Appreciate you here being vulnerable and sharing your story. At
Thank
what
you.
stage did you see or start to see the light and understand that you have a new mission, a new journey?
That's something that's happened more in recent years. Really, it's taken a long time to return to myself after my children were murdered or left or whatever. So it took years just find out who am I now. Now that I've, I'm no longer living in the land of my birth. I'm no longer a wife. I'm no longer a mother, or but who am I? So it was in Escape. I was another spoiler alert. I ended up in part of that recovery journey. I was so vulnerable and messed up. I ended up in a cult and really got messed up. I continued really got mind fucked in the cult. And so once I got free and clear of that trap, mind prison, then I could find out who I am and what am I doing here now. So that started to happen once I came to Hawaii and spent a lot of time in nature, just quiet in the ocean, with the trees and the wind, and nature really has healed me a lot. So I no longer suffer. I still can feel the emotions of the pain and grief, but I'm not suffering all the time, because I used to suffer all the time and felt like such a victim. But it's been years of, like I said, spending time in nature. And I live by myself now, so it's very quiet, and there's just me and nature really. So now I can see myself, feel myself, and know myself, and feel that I've got wisdom to share from what I've been through.
Appreciate
About
that.
how to move through agony and pain, and realize that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I deeply, deeply appreciate that. And it's wonderful to hear that you are finding an area of peace in your life. May I ask your permission? You mentioned two horrifying things. One, you're in a cult, and the other that you lost your children. Would you feel comfortable with sharing those stories with the audience?
Yes. After my husband died, like I said, I was a mess. I didn't really know what to do, where to go, or whatever. And so I was really looking for guidance. We'd started our spiritual. He was already on a spiritual path. I was raised an atheist. I had a lot of like disdain for religions and God and all that. But together we worked through those issues. We meditated together. We did tantra together, and it was my eyes and all my senses were open to there being more to life than just what's perceivable through the five ordinary senses. So I was looking for guidance. I was looking for a spiritual teacher. I spent some time in India, so I understood the guru disciple relationship. And I met this man who there was a lot of synchronicities and that went on, and I felt like he was my guru, and he invited me to come and train with him in Laguna Hills in California. So I did that, and it was a very strange relationship, because there was the guru disciple relationship, but there was also this other part of the relationship, and we ended up getting married. And while I thought that I was in the ashram with my guru, it turned out, I found out years later, like 8 years later, that I was actually in a cult, and he was the cult leader. So I was living in this cult. It was we lived in a normal home on a cul-de-sac, and there were other homes of the other cult members, and they would come and clean, and we'd do activities together, and it was a cult. So it had all the hallmarks of a cult, a high control group, where we were given names, and our time was accounted for, and had to be focused on the cult leader and what he wanted us to do. And I got pregnant. We had sex one time. I got pregnant, and so by that time I had 3 children. And he has a narcissistic personality disorder. He's still operating. He's an extremely dangerous predator. He's a pedophile, and he's a rapist. Not of me. I was in a celibate marriage for 8 years, but he wasn't. He was grooming the boys and the men in the cult, as well as having sex with randoms and all that time. So my son came home from school one day, and he was upset, and I suggested he didn't want to talk. So I said, "Why don't you go to bed and we'll talk about it in the morning?" And in the morning he was gone, and I knew something was wrong. And by the end of the day, we reported him missing to the police. And then the next day, the cult leader sent his assistant out to look for my son in the woods behind our house, and he found him with a knife wound to his neck and with the kitchen knife beside him. The cult leader spun the whole thing that my son had taken his own life because he found out he was gay, and he knew that would be unacceptable to me. That was my fault. I was the one that caused him to take his life. And also, I hadn't given him the life that he wanted because I hadn't been a very obedient disciple. I was very resistant. There was just so much hypocrisy and double standards. So he blamed me for my son's death. And it wasn't until years later, and speaking with some of the boys who were there was a cult also based in Melbourne, and there were 2 young boys in that cult, and they'd been groomed from the time they came into the cult. They were told they were gay. If they only just admitted they were gay, all their issues would be solved. And I just realized that that's what was happening with my son, and he was murdered to prevent the cult leader being exposed as a pedophile, a rapist, a groomer, and a con man. So after that, I still didn't leave the cults. Just after that, I still didn't even know I was in a cult, and I went to see this man who'd been the cult counselor. So in addition to having sessions with the cult leader, these healing sessions, and we had to go and see a kinesiologist and a psychologist as well, which I never did. But I went to see him after my son was murdered, and I walked in the door, and he said, "I knew you'd come and see me. You know you're in a cult, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't know I'm in a cult. I thought I was in an ashram with my guru." And he said, "Go home and Google cult characteristics." So I did that, and sure enough, it was a charismatic leader who's the arbitrator of truth, uses brainwashing, gaslighting, love bombing, hate bombing, all check, 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 check. And I realized I was in a cult, and I had to get out. And it turned out my family all knew, my friends all knew, but no one said anything to me in that whole 8 years. So I know this goes against popular opinion or like professional opinion, but from my experience, if you know someone's in a cult, tell them, because I didn't know. I don't know how I would have got out if I hadn't been told. But I think it's important to know, provide evidence. Like, it would have been good if I'd had photos of him with his hook, get a PI and follow him and do a forensic accountancy, and other cult members could have come forward and said what was happening to them, but there was this code of silence. So when I found out, I left. He still had me trapped because I had a child with him, and he wasn't going to let me leave because of the laws. And then on a spiritual level, he said that we'd been working for tens of thousands of lifetimes to get to this point. So if I left, I'd be turning my back on God, on my purpose, on myself. So I'm pretty sure now, when I look back, I think he let me go because he knew that if he didn't, he would have another death on his hands, because I was in hell and I didn't know how to get out. And then came to Kauai, and then because of the mind fuckery that he did on all my kids, like, he turned them against me. He poisoned them. He told one of them I love more than the other. He did that, what narcissists do. It's called triangulation. They just turn people against each other, with themselves looking like the savior. So he did that with my other children, and they were brainwashed and mind controlled, and that's where they are. So it was a very expensive lesson, that whole cult time. I still deal with guilt and shame that I got involved, that I stayed involved, because people could say, well, you could have left any day. But that's not really, or how did you get into a cult? It's not really understanding that it has nothing to do with intelligence, but it's all related to emotional wounding. And I had that. I was extremely wounded and very vulnerable, and a prime candidate for a cult leader.
What advice would you give to young people who might find themselves in a dangerous situation they don't even know it? What would you educate them on? Be careful if you see these signs.
Yeah, be careful if you see, or you're with people who want to tell you what to do and how to do it and what to think and what to believe, and then they'll tell you that they know you better than yourself, or just be careful of people who want to control you in any way, whether it's physically, emotionally, sexually, financially. And I think that a lot of young people are, well, we are really vulnerable to influence from people who set themselves up as authority figures. So it's what's most important is, well, for me, my wounding was that I didn't love myself. I had a self-love deficit disorder, and that just made me completely vulnerable to coming under the control of someone else. So my advice would be to love yourself, respect yourself, take care of yourself, trust your intuition, and stay like really strong within yourself, and not be swayed around by it. And it's so easy to happen because it can happen online, can happen, offline. So it requires vigilance and diligence to really be analyzing every situation. And then if there are red flags, then just run, because it's much easier to get out at that point than go along, for a certain period of time, and then then it's much more complex to get out. So that's what I'd say. Trust yourself and listen to your intuition. And if it feels wrong, it probably is a wrong relationship or situation. And I can't hear you.
You decided as part of your journey to write a book. Why is that? What made you come to that decision?
Okay, I'll just tell you exactly what happened. I was lying underneath a coconut tree, enjoying that moment. And I thought about how important it was to be on the earth, connected to the earth and receiving the energy of the earth. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll, write about being grounded, because I hadn't been wearing shoes for a while, so I was really connected to the earth, and I knew it was really benefiting me. I could feel how much more vitalized I felt, and healthy, energized, strong, all those sorts of things. So I started writing about grounding, which is being directly connected to the earth, skin to earth, like our ancestors were. And there's a documentary called Earthing on YouTube, which everyone should watch. It's like scientific proof of how we do need to be connected to the earth to be rebalanced electromagnetically and physiologically and psychologically. And then from that, I just kept writing and writing. And what happened was that I was understanding there are so many natural medicines that people don't really know about, or they've forgotten about, or they think that they're too easy or simple to be effective. But they're really important. They're essential. You don't even hear many doctors or even like natural medicine doctors talking about the importance of being directly connected to the earth, spending time in nature, or being out in sunlight. What I do is I sun gaze. So I receive the light of the sun as it goes above the horizon, and then also when it sets at night too. So I receive that sunlight directly into my eyes. So what my book is a collection of all the medicines that are available to us through nature and through our bodies, because we have all this, like I'm calling them body technologies that we can use to improve our health, like our breath, for instance. Breath work's been it's an ancient way of increasing your physical, mental, spiritual health. And we've got, we can use our voice, we can move our body. And so the book is really like hundreds of natural medicines. And then also the spiritual technologies that we can use. Like today I was even writing about hair as being a technology. Our hair's like, it's not a dead thing. It's their antennas that pick up from the environment. And, we can receive information, not that we're always conscious about, but we are receiving information through our hair. And when hair is grown to its longest length, the body will start producing calcium and phosphorus and magnesium. So, there's so much about our bodies and our natural world that we really do not understand. And especially now when most people are relating to life through a black screen or an electronic device, it's very disempowering for human beings to be living life through screen technologies. We really need to be, living life through the natural world primarily. So that's what I'm writing about.
It's so interesting because I feel that the things that get time and get out there is when there's a financial incentive. So if it's a pill or if it's a tool that somebody's selling, then yeah, somebody has a financial incentive to talk about it. But if it's spending, 10 minutes in sunlight to get, and keep me honest here, I think it's vitamin E that gets generated when you're in the sun, and I might be mistaking which vitamin. Um, or if it's, as you said, spending some time in nature, that's scientifically proven to reduce stress levels. Nobody is making money off of that. Nobody is becoming rich or famous out of doing simple things. Everybody knows that, just 10, 20, 30 minutes of physical activity a day is great for you, but yet nobody's there for benefit financially, so we don't talk about it. But the truth is, you're right. There's a lot of things you can do. They're free. And you talked about breathing, taking a deep breath, right? That will reduce stress levels, and that will help you in so many different ways. It's really interesting. I think that's wonderful.
That's true. I hadn't made that connection, which is so obvious, but that's true, because what the medicines I write about are all free, and they're all safe, and they're all effective, and they can be used in conjunction, most of them anyway. And you're right. That's the reason that they're not being popularized, because they can't be sold.
Right.
But they are the most powerful medicines that are available to us.
I think we as human beings are also very susceptible to silver bullets, right? We're looking for this miracle, it was the snake oil back in the day, the cure all that, oh, you swallow this and you'll be fine. That seems to be like something that we just want, right? Even if it doesn't exist. And it looks like we've actually invented one of these miracle cures with what was it, Ozempic, or one of these weight cures. I said there will never be a pill that will reduce your weight. Turns out that they figured even that. But doing the work, going on a hike, that's a little bit more difficult, right? But it's clearly free, obviously. Give us a little bit of an example. So we talked about breathing, we talked about nature, which we love hiking and we love nature. What else can people do? Keep their families and themselves healthy and safe. What are the practices and advice that you would give?
Body will respond in an inflammatory way when it receives anything that's unnatural. And inflammation is like the root cause of a whole lot of chronic conditions. So that means if we eat anything that's unnatural or highly processed, the body's going to immediately set up this inflammatory response, because it feels like it's being under attack. So it's really important to eat foods that are as close as possible to what they were when they were growing on the earth, and organic, fresh as possible, locally grown if possible, and just as natural as possible. I'm not into like raw food diet, but yeah, we need some raw foods. We need to eat a lot of leafy greens. Our DNA is most similar to chimps, and they eat like 97% leafy greens. So we need to have a lot more green leaves in our diets, in smoothies or salads or whatever it is. And then fruits and vegetables are not only sources of nutrition and structured water, which is another thing to talk about, is water, but they're also the source of biophotons, or biophotonic light. And we need light, and we do produce light, so we can eat fruits and vegetables that'll give us that biophotonic energy, so the body can then optimize itself. And then living foods are really important to eat too, because of the energies that's in them. So I sprouts, and then that energy that's in the sprout, I then take into my body, and that gets used. I don't know exactly how, but the body certainly optimizes my health from eating those sprouts. That's something simple that everyone can do.
There's something divine. I apologize for using that word, but that's how I
No,
felt
don't
about.
apologize. It's
But
my
it's
favorite
kind
word.
of it's a weird word to use, because I felt that gardening, right, growing something from a seed, I just felt that whole process was really magical, is how I felt about it. So there's something wonderful about even just gardening and growing things.
We all should be doing it to some degree, whether it's, like I said, sprouts or a pot of herbs or whatever. It's a really important practice for us. We're human beings. We really are. We have these animal bodies, but we're also it would naturally be growing food for ourselves and our families. So being in the garden that's such a good medicine. It's really important medicine. And take kids out in the garden, and teach them about watching the cycles of the plants. It's all really important. It helps the body. Like the nervous system calms down. And there's a series of books called The Ringing Cedars,
Mm.
And it's about a woman who lived in Siberia out in the, out the tiger or whatever, she's very attuned to nature. And so she meets this man and she starts teaching him what she knows. And one of the things she teaches, that if you take a seed and hold that seed under your tongue for a certain amount of time,
Mm.
so that the seed's then impregnated with your saliva and your energy and your DNA. And then I think that there's a planting with the moon. A lot of these like highly evolved gardening practices are related to the cycles of the moon. And then you plant the plant, and that plant will grow and have medicine that's specific for you. And my understanding is, because there's consciousness everywhere in nature. It may not be human consciousness, but plants have consciousness. So trust and know and communicate with the plants that I am growing, that they will grow so that they're optimizing my health as well. And it is divine, and I'm happy to use that word.
It just
It is
struck me,
magical.
you go to the supermarket, you buy your hopefully fruits and veggies, and you kind of take them for granted. But that process of I got a hydroponic kit and I grew some from seed. And that process, it was transformative because my kids wouldn't eat fruit and vegetables. Fruit, yes, vegetables less, especially greens. So I said, okay, I'm gonna grow some leafy greens from seeds. And I did this thing where my daughter and sons, they named the seeds. And then they grew and every morning they would run down, they would check what's happening. And it was this like just talking about it, it's crazy. I'm saying I have goosebumps from a seed growing, but it was magical when we saw them sprout. And then they kind of grew and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you eat them. And I was before that, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I was shouting at my kids, eat your fucking salad. And it was this argument with them, because we know that fruit and vegetables healthy and you got to do it, it's part of being healthy. And but they wouldn't do it, right? They're kids. And I was just fighting that, and I felt bad, like being angry at my kids to force them to do something which is good for them. After we grew our own stuff and went through that experience, they started eating salad. I even remember that I had this tomato tree. Tomatoes are difficult to grow. I couldn't master that. But Emma, my daughter, she jumped up and she took a leaf of tomato. And I'm like, I'm like, you can't eat that. And my wife, smartass as she is, Googles and was like, no, you can eat tomato leaves. And she's like, oh. So, a month ago, she wouldn't eat like lettuce. Now she's eating tomato tree leaves, not even the tomato itself. And I was like, this process, this experience of growing your own stuff, it truly is magical. Look at the change that it had to my children. So I was just so impressed by that, on the magic, right? Or the spiritual change, or whatever you want to call it, of that connection to nature, what that can do, even to children, instead of fighting with them, right? They make that change in themselves. That's absolutely delightful.
That was brilliant. Well done. That was divinely inspired.
Oh,
Perfect.
to
Absolutely
me, it
perfect.
was just blind luck. I just fell upon this thing. I was like, oh, we should do that, and it just turned into this crazy thing. Um, and today they eat salads, no problem.
Hmm.
Such a transformation. I think a lot of parents fight with that.
Yeah.
Oh, eat your veggies, right? That whole thing. Um, so that was such a surprising experience for me. So I love your comments about gardening and these natural remedies that are out there.
Right.
Um,
And just for that, to be connected to nature like that, it's so important for all of us. And you've given that gift to your children now that they're going to have for the rest of their lives. So that was brilliant. Good job. Excellent parenting. I
I,
was going to
I
say for
Go
you.
ahead.
I was going to also say about water and drinking pure water, because the quality of the water that we drink really affects our health. And while spring water is optimal, and I'm not talking bottled water because that can
Hmm.
have microplastics in it, but if you can find a spring, and there are websites that will indicate where springs are, and then take bottles and fill up your water bottles to drink spring water, Otherwise, another way of optimizing water is to take it out into the sun and leave it in the sunlight, and it'll receive the photonic light, and then it's taken to a higher level so that the body is better sort of hydrated by the water. You can also put, even if you've bought the fruits and vegetables from the supermarket, you can just put them out in the sun for a little bit before, like the fruit, just put it out in the sun for a little bit before you eat them, and then they're also increased in their vibration. You can make sun tea by putting a tea bag in a clear glass and putting that out in the sun, and then that makes sun tea. So there are lots of also another, this is, I don't know how far to go with this, but also we can bless water and food. You thank it and it will increase its vibration. There's a woman called Veda Austin, and she kind of follows the work of a man called Masaru Emoto, and he was the guy that froze water after exposed some water to kind, loving comments, and some water to verbal abuse, and then some water to nothing at all. And then when he froze the water and looked at the ice crystals, the water that had been spoken to lovingly had beautiful crystals, and the one that had been abused had all these fractured, jagged crystals, and the other one, I think, was sort of somewhere in between that. And then what Veda Austin has done, she actually, like, sleeps with water next to her, and she has recorded in the ice that then gets frozen after, in the morning, she'll freeze it and then look at the ice, and the water has recorded something from her dream, like she dreamt of a ship, and in the water so you can see the ship. She's repeated this over and over and over again, and she's come to the understanding that water has consciousness. So, and the same with like food and plants and trees and all that. So we can actually foster relationships with a lot of other intelligences than we're led to believe, and that has benefits for us too.
It's interesting. I mean, there's this border of the stuff that science hasn't figured out yet, and that's the stuff that I kind of call spiritual or magic. We don't really understand it yet, but science isn't in the job of saying, oh, that's wrong. Science is in the job of really exploring and figuring things out. And the one thing that any scientist will tell you is that we don't know everything. And one of my favorite sayings is that magic, or call it whatever you want. I don't want to be insulting by using that word magic, but the divine or magic or the miracles in this world, it's just science we don't understand yet, is the way I love to look at it.
But it's real. And to tap into that other world, that's when life becomes extraordinary. Really, the synchronicities and the blessings and the optimal health that for me, that's come from deepening my connection with the unseen intelligences that surround me. It's extraordinary, and it's magical. And I know people like shy away from that, and they don't want to really talk about that, the unseen world or non-physical entities and all that, but they're real, and they're not all good, but it's a part of life that for me it's the biggest part.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Isabella. Absolute delight to have you today. I appreciate you sharing your journey and what you've learned on the way. I have a very difficult question I would like to wrap up with. If you had to go back to 20-year-old Isabella, what would you tell her?
Love yourself. Love yourself. Trust yourself. Follow your heart, and don't get into that cult.
Appreciate that.
Don't do it. It's not going to end well. And also enjoy life as much as possible, especially the simple things. It's not necessary. I used to think that I had this big purpose and, had to fulfill some dreams or whatever. But I really enjoy living simply and enjoying the sunrise and watching birds fly over and growing things in the garden and spending just time with friends. So yeah, enjoy the simple things in life.
That's amazing. I couldn't agree with you more. The biggest joys in life are the smallest ones. I find that I'm learning and relearning that lesson all the time. I have three small kids, and sometimes the simplest thing is seeing my little smallest 5-year-old monster smile is the most amazing thing in the world. Isabella, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Ari. Thank you for the. Some of your questions were surprising and somewhat challenging, but I appreciate the opportunity to share my experiences and what I've learned, and I hope that's a benefit to your listeners. And appreciate also what you're doing to provide a platform for people to tell their stories, so that wisdom can be passed on, and hopefully we can all learn from each other.
Absolutely. I have one more ask to you for you to share the name of your book, and we'll also put it in the comment section. And with that, we'll wrap up.
This is my book. This is called Putting on the Armor of God, a survival handbook for the Great Awakening in New Earth. And I have another one coming out in a couple of months called New Human of New Earth. And that will be available on Amazon and also through my website, which is www.feelingbetternaturally.love. And I have a YouTube channel, Feeling Better Naturally, and a Substack under the same name.
Isabella, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.